I'm an abuser. That's a joke. Abuser.
Oh.
Okay. And now I've got it on video. I told a really, really bad joke during the conference. One of the students that gave a paper compared the Tao, the Confucian, the Tao, with Thomas Aquinas' concept of natural law. It's a pretty good paper. The student's name was Luke, by the way. And when we had a chance to ask questions, I said to him, rather than use the Tao or talk about Aquinas' natural law, use the force, Luke. I just felt compelled to do that. However, okay. So Hume critiques Berkeley and does away with the idea that there is a persistent mind of God that we can know, because we can, and that there's a persistent self that is our soul, that is experiencing all of this, because we cannot actually have that observation. You can't be aware of yourself. We, as Berkeley says, we have no conception of our soul. We don't really perceive it. So Hume takes that step. And that means that the only thing we could actually know for sure, if we use the model of the empiricist point of view, that the only thing I know for sure is what I'm actively experiencing, is then that I'm actively experiencing what I'm experiencing. And so anything that's outside of the scope of what I think of as this lively set of perceptions that I'm having, I don't have grounds for saying I know it if I'm using that model. Right? Obviously, we practically speaking have to assume a lot of things without actually knowing it. And Hume is a very, very practical man, and he's not saying that we ought to be incredibly skeptical about everything. He's critiquing the metaphysicians that have argued that they think they've demonstrated these things. And we'll talk a little bit about why I think that argument has succeeded. Right? But let me follow my notes a little bit. I love this line. He was very disappointed. He was a very young man, 18 years old, published this treatise. He thought, this is going to make me famous, and it's going to transform science and everything else. And he was so disappointed. Never literary attempt was more unfortunate than my treatise of human nature. It fell dead-born from the press. No one really got it. There were people that read it, but they really didn't quite see the point that he was making, until famously Immanuel Kant reads it and understands exactly what Hume is getting at, and at that point famously says that he woke from his rationalistic slumbers, or his Wolffian slumbers.
Dogmatic, right?
Pardon?
Dogmatic, right?
Dogmatic slumbers. Christian Wolff was the philosopher that adapted or kind of summarized Leibniz's point of view. And that was the main philosopher that Kant studied when he was younger. And so the rationalism of Wolff is what Kant basically accepted. But once you read Hume's treatise, you realize, whoa, this has to be answered. This problem has to be answered. So basically the main philosophical works that we associate with Kant and Kant's revolution begin after that in response to Hume's problem. And so the critiques, for example, are all written after that. Kant's 61 years old when he starts writing these. So it's really late, if you think about it, for people to suddenly blossom into becoming a famous philosopher at that point. So if we look at how this thesis works out, we have perceptions. Notice that follows Locke. So we're building on our predecessors here, and following Locke, the only thing we we have really are these perceptions. But it gets interesting because we have to talk about lively impressions versus less lively ideas. So, for example, if I think about things, and it's really kind of interesting today because, of course, for David Hume years ago, there would have he dies in 1776, which is a great year